encouragement to turn tragedies into your own triumphant life story? If so, this podcast is for you. Listen to powerful guests who have persevered through challenges so you can gain strength to build your championship life. The host of Professor of Perseverance podcast, Dr. James Purdue.
Hey, come on in again. Let's have a good old time. Let's learn. Let's get motivated. Let's get inspired. Let's learn from our guest on how to overcome adversity, to kick these troubles and struggles in the mouth, and not only survive, but thrive into life. Hey, we're going to jump on and dive on in. This is going to be a good one here. Not to say that my other's not good and great, but we're going to dive on in. Hey, the speaker today, our guest today, is going to share the good, the bad, and the ugly circumstances in which he had to adjust and learn to conquer with confidence. Hey, check this out now. From drug smuggling parents to smuggling Bibles into China in the 80s, to attending inner city schools in Mexico, near-death experiences, and had to overcome insecurity. Our guest today has a motto and theme to live by. Life is not just what happens, it's how we respond. Author of the book with over 500 reviews, Speak with Fear. Welcome to the show, Mike Acker.
Hey, it is great to be here. Yeah, absolutely love diving in, talking about how to overcome challenges and really speak with no fear, live with no fear, lead with no fear. This whole idea of not letting any of that stuff hold you back from your best life right now.
There we go. I like the way you led into your other book, Lead with No Fear, and write, as in writing. Typing for me because I can't write. My fingers don't work that good anymore. But write to speak, and also grow your soul. Hey, this is a 40-day guide to get unstuck, restored, and reset in faith, church, and spiritual life. And there's another book by Mike. But again, man, over 500 reviews with his first book, Speak with No Fear.
Right. Yeah, the whole idea there was that as I work with so many professionals, that they have these barriers in communication. And I believe this is really true in all areas of life, that people have these barriers that hold them back from their full potential. They know that they're capable of more, but they've hit something. And so often what I found as a communication coach is that people hit this barrier of confidence and communication. And so I wrote this book, and really the idea that I found out was that I'm not this natural guy. I had to learn how to do it. And so I tell my stories, I tell my failures, and that connected. And now it is the highest ranked book in the world on that topic. But beyond just that book, really, I love what you're talking about here, because it's a story of my parents' life, perseverance, and it's a story of my life. And definitely I've gone through those different challenges, and I love to help your audience and really reach people to talk about how to overcome challenges today.
And again, I tell people, when we're persevering, we don't have to go 100 miles an hour. If we're moving at a snail's pace, as long as we're moving forward, I don't care. You know, some people say, well, it seems like I go 3 steps forward, then I get knocked back 2 steps. Hey, you're still 1 step in the good then.
Yeah.
So, just keep persevering, move forward, and go from there. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that forward progress. I think that a lot of people have this idea of jumping to success. And years ago, I realized that success is not a moment that you arrive at. It's what you do every day to arrive at an eventual destination that people recognize success. Yeah, I remember when Spanx first came out. Do you remember Spanx when it first came out? And it was something laughed about. Everybody's like, stupid, that's dumb. I can't believe Spanx. I mean, why? And now she's a bona fide billionaire yet? I don't know. But she was doing this on the side every single night, going through the rejection, going through the people making fun of her, and she's shipping out orders from her home, cardboard boxes everywhere, and just living it. She persevered through that. She kept on making those advances, and look where she is now. And it's that forward momentum. Keep moving forward. Once you got something good, keep moving forward with it.
Even if we do get knocked down, move forward 3 steps forward. Say we get knocked back 5 steps. Now we've lost things. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Oh.
Now we've learned from where we've been. Now we sit back and take what we've learned, what we failed from, re-challenge, reevaluate, move on. Or is there a way we can reach our goal and skip what we're trying and still get to our destination? And we just sit back and figure it out. So even if we do fail, we learn from it, and we can see how far we have come where we were.
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing is learning from other people's failures. It minimizes the amount that we have to commit on our own. But if we're going to fail, and when we fail, at least we can learn from that. I do love learning from the failures of others. And I believe that if we would observe the failures of others more often in a positive way, not to make fun of them or highlight them on social media and cancel them, but if we were to observe them and go, man, there for the grace of life go I could easily go down that route, but I'm going to learn from their mistake, and I'm going to go the opposite way. That a lot of people say, I got to learn from myself. And that's the foolish way of looking at it. I got to learn from others. That's the wise way of looking at that.
Yeah, I'm the knucklehead. I learned from mine. I'm the knucklehead. Hey, quick story. I remember one time we had who we called back in the day our Fonzie in our neighborhood. He's like 16 years old. We're 12 and 13. We all looked up to him and everything. And one day him and I got into a fight. Here I am, 12, 13 years old, fighting a 16-year-old. And boy, he'd get me down. He was beating my head like he was playing the bongos. And he'd let me up. And then as soon as he let me up, I'd get one good shot in. And he had me down, beating me again. And my dad sat on the front porch watching this. All right. That went on about 3 times. And he told my dad, he said, George, I'm going to let him up, but I'm not going to let him hit me and not do anything about it. So after about the 3rd time, I finally quit. My dad tells me, our Fonzie, David, he leaves. My dad, he goes like this. He said, boy, I got to tell you, I admire your guts and everything and wanting to fight for yourself. But let me tell you something. In life, there's no need in getting your butt kicked more than once if you don't have to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, learn from it the first time so you don't have to repeat it the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th time. Unfortunately, I wish I could say that I've always learned from my mistake the first time, but I haven't. And so I have plenty of those moments like you as a 12-year-old, but not when I was 12. And then there's been plenty of times where I have learned from others, and that's the goal. And that's even what I shared today. Just how can we avoid that in the first place? Learn from failure if you fail, but if you can't, avoid failure.
Avoid it if all possible. Yes, right. So, hey, let's go ahead and dive into this story with the drug smuggling parents. And I mean, I think it's just as dangerous with the Bible as going into China. And so, yeah, if you can share some stories with this and what you learned through them and things.
Yeah. Well, my parents were drug smugglers back in the day before, and they might deny this. Okay. So
there you go.
But my parents were drug smugglers back in the day before cartels. So before it got nasty, and it was mostly hippies who were just about free love and just enjoying life and just going about it. And marijuana was a big part. So my dad learned that he could smuggle marijuana, fly down to Colombia, cut out the middleman, and fly back. And that the middleman cost a lot of money. So if he could cut that out, then he should do it. So he was a pharmaceutical entrepreneur, and he learned how to speak Spanish and fly planes. Well, it became quite lucrative, and he had all kinds of adventures. In fact, he just released a book. It's on my shelf behind me called Pirates, Scoundrels, and Saints. And when I read his book, I thought, oh, this is just my dad. Every single character is my dad. It's about drug smugglers. It's about all of that life. And why is it so well written? Well, it's so well written because he lived the life. He crashed the planes. He went to jail. He got pulled aside. He did all that stuff. And so he did that and met my mom and included her along the way. And then they decided that they were going to build a family. So he switched from pharmaceutical entrepreneuring into coffee entrepreneuring, and they started up a coffee company. Well, along that way, as they were doing that, they're still kind of involved in the hippie lifestyle. They had this radical, total life transformation when both of them became Christians a couple months apart from each other. And not like a political Christian and not like a moralizing Christian or just a church attending Christian. They became the type of Christian that wanted to do the words of Jesus, which is actually what a Christian is. Christian just means a little Christ, a little Jesus. You're so much like Jesus that people say, oh, you're like Jesus. So that's actually what Christian means. So that's what they did. They decided, let's try to do everything we can to love people. And I grew up seeing my parents go soup kitchens and feeding poor and going to the projects and playing with the neighbor kids whose dad was in jail and going down to Mexico and serving the poor and disenfranchised. And part of that was helping more people understand what they understood. So at 5 years old, we went off to China and we put Bibles under our suitcases, under the clothes in our suitcase. And we went through and smuggled Bibles into China. Apparently, my whole family was just an absolute horror of what my parents were doing with my sister and I. But we did it. And my dad said, hey, I figured for years I never got caught smuggling. So now I'm doing something good and I'm not going to get caught smuggling either. And so we did that. We went to Philippines and we went to Haiti and all these different places and just serving poor, trying to lighten the load of their life here and beyond. And then at age 10, my parents said, let's move to Mexico. Now, at that point in time, I had quite the cozy life in the United States. We were doing some good things, so that felt good. My dad had become a lawyer, so illegal to lawful, and he was able to produce a good income for us. My mom was able to stay home. We had family dinners. I had overcome a speech impediment and really trained myself to say the words "ja" sounds "ja." My mom had worked with me, so really I had overcome some adversity. I persevered. My family had gotten to a good spot. So here we are. My parents had gone through this roller coaster of the crazy life of smuggling and drugs and all that went with that hippie lifestyle, seeing every major concert you could possibly do, living lives worthy of books being written about. And then they kind of went through this trough and came back out and became these committed Christians, respected members of the community. And then my dad comes home and says, I quit my job. We're moving to Mexico. And quite literally, he came home, family dinner. I still remember it. I was 10 years old. And he said, I quit my job. And then my mom and dad got off from the table and had a conversation in the other room because he didn't tell her or ask her. He just did it. And so then we moved to Mexico and we drove down that summer. I left all my friends, turned 11 as we went down there. I remember arriving in the bed of the house that we were renting. It was less than $500 a month in 1990. And we lived 3 blocks away from the beach. And we're in gorgeous, sunny Mazatlan, Mexico. And I just wept. I left everything behind. And I didn't fit in. And so the difficulty that year was, where am I? Who am I? And how do I fit into this new culture? We started taking Spanish classes, and I was not doing very well in the Spanish classes. I couldn't get it. My sister was picking it up, but I couldn't get it. And then I told my dad, I said, Dad, I think I need to go into a Spanish immersion. I had met another American kid who was 2 years older than me. I said, I got to do a Spanish immersion program like him so I can really learn Spanish. I mean, I got this challenge of being the only white, buck-tooth, blonde-haired, all arms, all legs, and not fitting in. I got to learn the language. I got to be able to communicate. My dad thought it was a great idea. Well, he knew a 5th grade teacher, and his friend, his 5th grade teacher, served in the inner city public school of downtown Mazatlan, Mexico in 1990. Now, at that point in time, the tourist industry in Mazatlan was not what it is today. When a movie was released in the United States, like Lion King in 1993-ish, that movie was coming to theaters in 6 months down the road. So the American culture was not very commonly known or seen. It was from far off. So my dad brings me in the middle of the school year and decides that, yeah, Spanish immersion is great. I like immersion. My dad's extreme extrovert. I'm going to bring my 11-year-old awkward son with these teeth that stick out like a horse, and we're going to drop him into a full Spanish-speaking school. So my dad comes in and he puts me out there and he says, okay, Mike, I'm going to go talk to the principal, see if I can get him to let you into the school. My dad can talk anybody into anything. And so he leaves me there while my dad's talking to the principal. The entire school lets go of whatever they're doing and surrounds me. And they create this perimeter around me. I backed up to the wall, and then they would send emissaries to come touch me and say things like, what's your name? What's your name? So kids were running to me, touch me, and run away. Teachers were laughing. Everybody's laughing at this weird total fish out of water, floundering in the middle everywhere. I'm terrified at this point in time, right? Kids just coming and running, girls coming up and running and hugging me, which sounds great, but I'm in 5th grade. Girls have cooties. I mean, this is awful. My dad comes out and says, Mike, I'll pick you up at 2:30. And then he leaves. And that's how I got thrown into school. That year was so difficult. I'd have to get up in front of the class and try to say some Spanish words. Everybody would laugh at me. It was just terrifying. I actually was so afraid of being part of everything that I created psychosomatic fevers, and I would get sick just so I wouldn't have to go to school. My mom said, you're sick again? How are you sick again? And then turns out it was just that fear. It was just that insecurity, that anxiety that was causing it in me. Finally, school ended, and I said, guys, I cannot do that again. I cannot go to that school again. So they put me in this bilingual school. And really at that point in time, I created this resentment towards my parents and this longing for the past. And it's so easy that when we look into the past, we often think that what's behind us is much better than we actually realized. And so we start really looking back at the past going, now that was amazing. I just got to get back there. So in my mind, and talking with another American kid who had the same thought, in my mind, I just thought if I could get back to the past, then I could get everything great. So I weathered through 6th grade. I weathered through 7th grade. And I got to 8th grade and I pleaded with my parents, just let me go have my dream. Let me get what I want. But unfortunately, sometimes when we get what we want, it's not actually as good as we think it's going to be. So I got to go to school in the United States for a couple months. And I realized I was once again out of water. I didn't know these kids. It was a new environment. And yet I adapted. And then I realized just the way I adapted here, I could adapt when I go back to Mexico. So after my couple months stint in Washington, going back to school, my family was all in Mexico. I returned and joined my family, and I embraced Mexican culture. But even though I embrace it, doesn't mean that always when you embrace something, it will embrace you. So I get back, and some of the same enemies that I had, some of the same people that didn't like me because of the color of my skin. I was around all Mexicans, and I was as white could be. They didn't like me. And so I had some kids who would pick on me, and I would walk up the stairs into my school. We had gone to a different school and finally kind of found my niche there. And there would be this senior in high school who would cuss me out. What are you doing here, effing gringo? You effing don't belong here. You're effing stupid. You're effing. I never heard the F word so many times as I did that morning. Teachers would hear it and smirk. Other kids would just like try to ignore it because he was a senior and I was in 8th and 9th grade. And that's what I dealt with. So even though now I had embraced it, not all of it was embracing me back. I had plenty of friends that were embracing me and making me feel confident, but still there's that insecurity that was lingering. And then he was hitting on it, and he was kind of touching those areas of your heart that hurt and saying things. I tried everything you could possibly do to avoid a bully or get around a bully. I remember praying every single day that let him not be there and rejoicing when he wasn't. At the end of 9th grade, I was living two different realities. The reality where I had fully become Mexican, and I today absolutely love Mexico. Whenever I find out someone's from Mexico, I feel like this kinship to them. I love the country, love the people. and just absolutely embrace them. I love so much of their food and so much of their candies and everything. So I had that love part that was already beginning to emerge, but I also had this hatred towards self. So love towards now the environment I was in, but hatred towards self because some of the hurtful words that had been said of me for that entire year, not to mention living in two cultures and some of the trauma I'd gone through in that. Now there was this internal angst. So what do you do when you're full of internal angst and sadness and depression and sorrow? Well, a lot of us, we go to match that. So I'd go home and I'd match my interior mode with exterior music. And I would start listening to things like Black from Pearl Jam. Now I have Pearl Jam on my records right here, but back then when you're depressed and you go home and you listen to Black, it's probably not the best for your mood. And that year was one of those years where I was living my best life externally, but having some of my worst thoughts internally. Fast forward to summer, we went back to the United States. I was at a camp and I got a chance to talk to a counselor. The counselor started talking to me. You need to talk to yourself about how you need to be heard, what you need to hear. You need to tell yourself what you need to hear. So I started doing what she said and looking myself in the mirror and saying things like this: Mike Acker, I like you. Mike Acker, I accept you. And I always felt so stupid, but I did it because she said so, and she's a counselor and she's got a DR in front of her name. And so that's important. And so I started working on this again and again and again. And something about the words and something about further embracing the culture and something about no longer looking back, somehow it clicked. And often the answer to any of the challenges that we have is not single faceted. It's multifaceted. So one was I developed a really great friendship. That was one facet with a guy named Ricardo, who I'm still in contact with today, even though he's moved out of country and lives in England. So Ricardo became my best friend. Two was I let go. I finally really, really, really let go of the past I was supposed to have. I leaned in and I spoke to myself the truth and I accepted my weaknesses. And all these different facets came around to really get me to a spot where I was fully present in that moment. And then I had a great year. I had a great next year. And then my parents come home one day and they say, and we're vacationing in the United States in the summer, and they say, hey, we're moving back to the United States. I'm going into my senior year. I have friends. I'm fully Hispanic at this point in time. My friends used to say I was more Mexican than I was American, even though my skin was white, my heart was dark in a good way. And I really felt the same way. I was going to law school in Mexico. I had everything planned. That's what was going on. And then we get uprooted again. And once again, having to find my place, having to find the culture. And here's the thing. If you look back at those whole years of my parents as drug dealers and switching over, and then this life in Washington, and then this trip down to Mexico for 7 years, and my parents stayed longer after they went back, and then my reacculturation into the United States. Again and again, the idea is just like what we were talking about at the beginning. It's that 1 foot forward. It's the next step and the next step. Ultimately, advance, advance, advance. Don't retreat. Don't bunker down. Take the next step. Is it counseling? Is it celebration? Is it joy? Is it education? Is it taking communication coaching, like what a lot of clients do with me? Is it writing a book? Is it starting a business? Is it taking that interview or the next interview or 30 interviews? But take that next step, one by one. Perseverance is not giving up. It's taking that next step. James, I could keep on going on and on and on about this, and I could preach to to your whole audience here, but I'll pause there and see if there's any questions that you want to interject at this, I don't know, midpoint mark. And he's not interjecting any notes. So I'm gonna keep on going here, James, in case you want to pop in at any point in time here as well. So what do I do now? Fast forward that, and I have became a pastor for 18 years, did that quite successfully, started churches. And I wanted to be the type of pastor that encouraged people to be the type of people that my parents were when I was a kid. And so we did all kinds of incredible work. We built wells in Tanzania, and we did work in Kenya, and we did work for water in Senegal and in Burkina Faso. And our whole thing was this: how can we help people who have been marginalized? How can we help people who've been just cast aside? So we did some work in rescuing people from sex trade, and we did some work in building houses down in Mazatlan. In fact, at one point in time, myself and a coalition of other churches, we said, what can we do to take this neighborhood in Mazatlan that was known for drugs and was known for crime? What can we do to really elevate them and lift them out of this? And so we went in, and different groups and different businesses, Christian groups, but also business groups that just loved what we were doing. They came in and we started building houses upon houses upon houses. Now, here's what happens. When you're in a neighborhood of insecurity, when you're in a neighborhood of fear, what happens? Well, fear reigns. But if you start handling different places in that neighborhood and giving them security and confidence, locks on their doors, hard walls that you can't just easily bust through, then also what happens is confidence increases and fear gets pushed out. So quite literally, by going in there and creating safe havens in this neighborhood, businesses were beginning to thrive out of homes because they could actually keep things in the house that they could sell. And now we were pushing out crime. That neighborhood today is no longer crime ridden like it was before we worked there. Let me just pause and transfer the principle that I just talked about in real life over to your life. If you got insecurity in your life in all of these different realms, so you have insecurity in some past failures, insecurity in relationships, insecurity in your speaking, insecurity in whatever area, if you will take some time and start creating some strength, not all at once, but one by one, what you'll see is that the confidence that you build up will push out the fear. So over here, we had physical houses that were tar paper shacks, dirt floors, insecurity. You couldn't keep anything. You couldn't be protected. Women felt unsafe because violent, horrific men would come in and do horrific things. And so as a result of that, there was fear and insecurity. We built physical houses, and that confidence started emerging. If a woman didn't feel safe in her house, she could go to the house of a friend that we had built, and she could be there while her husband was gone, and then she could sleep safely. Now we had a secure place. Confidence bred an area of confidence and pushed out fear. Take this over here. What happens is, just like over here, is we want to fix everything at once. But we didn't fix everything at once. We built one house at a time. Over here, if you're struggling with confidence, if you're struggling with insecurity, if you start taking care of one area at a time, you'll see that it flows into others. For example, when people come to work with me, they're often working on their communication. They know that their communication is not as strong as it could be. They know that when they go into places, they're self-doubting, they're insecure, they're wondering, they're terrified, they have all of this doubt. So what happens? It bleeds into other areas. The doubt on stage sometimes bleeds into relationships and elsewhere. So what I encourage people again and again is, if you build confidence in your communication, it will help you in your health. You'll literally feel better. It will help you in your relationships. It will help you in your finances. It will help you in your job. It will help you in your future. It'll help you in your legacy and your parenting. That's the value of building a strong structure in your communication. That's what I get to help people do. And so again and again, persevering through these different areas. Now, and I've just turned James' podcast into Mike's talk about whatever I felt like talking about. And I think James must have disappeared here. And so I'm going to go ahead and just leave you some places where you can find me, and I'll let James pick up on this later on. First of all, thank you, James, for letting me be on your show and really taking over your show today. Been an absolute pleasure to do so. Thank you so much for believing in what I do and in my message, so much so that you would just give me free reign. So I really appreciate that. And the second thing is, you can find me at mikeacker.com. That's MikeAcker.com. Some of what I talk about here today, it's found in my books. It's found on my YouTube show. It's found in my programs. And if you're thinking, Mike, I think that you would be a great fit for what I'm doing or a great fit to work with, I would love to do some work with you. And feel free to reach out to me. Just email me, info@mikeacker.com. Find me online. Find me on Amazon. Find me at my website. Hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And to James, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having me on your show. It's been great. Love what you're doing with this podcast and with this YouTube. And I wish you and your audience the absolute best.